Meeting. And keep admitting people. Okay. Hi everyone. It's nice to see so many people joining us today for our Hydrology Careers Q&A. We've got quite a lot of people still coming in, so I'll be periodically clicking admit people to the session. And we've got lots of people here on our panel who have careers in hydrology. So what I'm going to do is start by asking everyone to introduce themselves and to tell us a little bit about their current role and the responsibilities that they have in that. And also just to kind of describe a typical day at work in their job. I'm Liz Lewis. I'm a lecturer in hydrology at Newcastle University, and I'm back in the office for the very first time today, so it's weird. Yeah, but I'll be chairing the session, so if you have any questions, then please put them in the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat, and I'll ask those questions to the panel for you. So let's start with who's at the top of my screen. We've got Emily Fowler first. Do you want to introduce yourself, Emily?
Hi everyone, thanks for dialing into this. So I'm Emily Fowler. I'm a senior flood risk specialist at Mott MacDonald, which is an engineering consultancy. So I did a degree in geography 14 years ago and went straight into working for Mott MacDonald and haven't looked back. So I've been working on a range of projects at Mott for different clients, such as the Environment Agency, looking at flood defence schemes, doing flood modelling and flood mapping, looking at different policy, kind of catchment flood management plan type things, or projects for different water companies or utilities companies, or helping support different areas of the engineering consultancy like transport, or lots of wind farm kind of flood risk assessment type things for pushing through developments and stuff. I guess a typical day at the minute, I don't know, every day seems to be quite different. I work on a range of different projects with different teams, so I'm kind of the senior modeler in a lot of them, or so sometimes I'm just giving technical advice, or I'm project managing, or I also have a team of about 10 people now that I kind of help support and train. So kind of lots of client engagement or technical work or helping support people. So yeah, quite a variety of different things really.
Great, thanks Emily. Anita?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, great. Hi, my name's Anita Asadullah. I work for the Environment Agency. I'm currently a manager at the Environment Agency, leading a strategic team doing flood hydrology improvements work. So I'm a hydrologist by background. I did MSc at Imperial College in hydrology, and I worked in consultancy, first in Halcro in the UK, then Halcro in Argentina, and then I moved to DHI, same as a consultant, doing both high and low flows. They're based in Denmark, in Copenhagen. And then when I moved back to the UK, I joined the Environment Agency, been here about 4 years. So currently, day to day, I no longer really work with hydrology, with the numbers, with the data, which is a bit sad. I now do management. So I am sort of trying to raise the profile of hydrology in the agency and in the UK, make sure we are looking strategically at things we need to improve, how we work in hydrology, our data and our methods. So day to day, I'm doing a lot of talking to different people internally, trying to make sure we're defining what we need to do, trying to look for money to do what we need to do, checking up on projects that are going on, recruiting people, that sort of stuff nowadays. Yeah, does that cover it, Liz? Great.
Yeah, great, thank you. Michael?
Hello everyone, thanks Liz. I am Michael Pollock, and I work for a company called ARUP, who are consultancy. So I work in the consulting team as an engineer, and I joined just in March. So a typical day since I've joined has consisted of this, but sort of, being in front of a computer, but I expect it to be pretty different into 2021 with a lot more sort of outdoor visits. So I'll just give you a bit of background on my sort of qualification. So I did a civil engineering degree about 10 years ago, and then that was at Newcastle University, and then a master's in hydrology, also at Newcastle University. And then I did something called a knowledge transfer partnership, or a KTP, which is something if you're in that stage of your career, I'd encourage you to look at. It's a partnership between a university and a company. So I did mine with a hydrometric company, so a company that designs and instrumentation for hydrology. And as part of that, I did a PhD in rainfall uncertainty. And then just last year, I joined ARUP. So my role at the moment involves a lot of design work. So looking at maybe flood defense schemes, also looking at natural flood management opportunity mapping. So it's still trying different things, and but generally doing hydrological stuff. Thanks, Liz.
Great, thanks. Hayley?
Okay, hopefully this will work. When I tried to unmute myself before, the whole of Zoom collapsed. So I'm a Professor of Climate Change Impacts in the School of Engineering at Newcastle University. My day job's quite varied, not so much at the moment. It's mostly sitting in front of a screen like everybody else. But I guess prior to the pandemic starting, it was a real mix of supervising PhD students. I've got 7 at the moment. I've got a number of postdocs who work on different research projects that I spend time thinking about, developing, writing, submitting, revising, and then ultimately getting some of them, some of which Liz is involved with as well and leading. So I've got I think I've got 6 postdocs at the moment, and a few of those are based at the UK Met office. So a lot of my actual role at the moment is supervising a reasonably large group of researchers, both PhD students and postdocs. I then also have a teaching component to my role as well. So I've got a couple of modules that I teach on, one of which I lead, and that takes up some of my time. I also I'm director of a doctoral training program called One Planet. So we have a cohort of 13 students who start, we've got 2 cohorts now, it started in 2019. And so that's a role as well. And I spend a lot of time now actually on advisory committees and things like that, ranging from, I suppose, the Scottish equivalent of DEFRA, various roles with the Environment Agency, and bits of consultancy. I mean, I'm doing some work at the moment looking at, well, a weather action task force for Network Rail. So I think it's really interesting actually as you move through different roles in academia and you get to a more senior role, you end up in much more, as Anita was saying, a sort of management and advisory role, but it doesn't mean that it's any less interesting. I'm not actually doing the number crunching nowadays, but it's really interesting kind of having those ideas and seeing them carried out by members of the team, but also advising on, you know, climate resilience, you know, how to take new technologies developed in academia through into practice by both Network Rail, Environment Agency and others. Just a tiny bit about my career, I guess. So I did an undergraduate degree. I'm a geographer by training, hooray. like many of us. I did geography at Cambridge and then came to Newcastle to do a master's degree in water resource systems engineering, and then stayed on to do a PhD. And actually, I've been at Newcastle for the whole of my career, apart from I've spent about a year on and off over at NCAR in Boulder in Colorado. And I've spent a couple of years out on maternity leave as well. And also worked part-time for a very long time, for 8 years. I worked only 3 days a week, and I came back 3 years ago full-time. I don't think academia is really a role you can do part-time. And I've kind of moved through research, through a NERC postdoctoral fellowship, to a reader position and then a professor position in 2012. So, I mean, I've got loads of, I suppose, I mean, if you're interested in an academic career, then I've got loads of tips for you. But yeah, just to say that I think that a lot of people think that you have to move to have a successful academic career. And that's what we're all told, but you know, you don't need to do that.
Great, thanks, Hayley. Andrew?
Hi everyone, my name's Andrew Chiverton. I'm working the low flow side of the Environment Agency. My role is split. I spend 50% of the time in the national team and 50% of my time in the area team. How the Environment Agency is set up, so we have one national team that takes a high level overview, writes policy and provides guidance. And then each of our 14 sub areas have a different hydrology team which undertake the day-to-day work. So my role in the Devon and Cornwall area team is I'm the lead hydrologist. So I'll take the lead on high profile bits of work, complex bits of work, things that are going to have a large impact on the environment or the public. And I spend probably about 25% of my time training the other team members. Probably 50% of my time actually doing hydrology work, getting stuck into data, and about another 25% of my time attending meetings and chatting to managers on issues we're having and ways to overcome problems. So the other part of my job is in the national team. I work with 3 other hydrologists in the national team, and we provide guidance to area hydrologists, water companies, consultants on how to undertake various assessments, abstraction assessments or drought assessments, particularly for water companies. Little bit about my background. I did an undergrad at Lancaster University in environmental science, then went on to Newcastle, which is very much a common theme, I think, from listening to people so far. I did an MSc in hydrology and climate change, and then spent 4 years at Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, where I undertook a PhD. And then after that, I've moved to the Environment Agency, and I've been there for about six years since. So yeah, it's a little summary from me.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And then finally, Dave.
Oh, seem to have lost my video on the, but anyway. Yeah, David Rylands. I'm a member of the National Flood Hydrology Team, which is a small team in the Environment Agency spread across the country. And we're sort of supporting people doing works in flood risk management around the country. So I suppose the 3 ways of managing flood risk are to prevent it in the first place. So there's a lot of work being done on flood mapping, showing the risk of flooding so that people can make decisions on land use, where to build things, where not to. And then there's a lot of work coming in on checking flood risk assessments from consultants working for developers, seeing that they are getting the numbers about right and building in the right places. Then the second thing, of course, is flood alleviation schemes. A lot of big schemes going along at the moment. Quite a lot of money being pumped into providing flood risk assessments. My colleague Peter Spencer up in Warrington gets involved a lot in a lot of the schemes going on in Cumbria and elsewhere. And then there's flood warning. There's a lot of work on incident management at the moment. Flood forecasting, flood warning is a big thing. And just about everybody in the Environment Agency gets involved in flood risk management, in incident management. So this flood forecasting duty roles, trying to forecast where the floods are going to be, how high they're going to get. And we're doing that in conjunction with the Flood Forecasting Centre in Exeter, where quite a few of our colleagues have gone on to work with the Met Office, and also with the areas who actually issue the warnings and deal with the stuff on the ground. Other stuff we get involved in, we've been doing, we produce guidelines. A lot of the work that's done in flood estimation in the UK is based on the flood estimation handbook, and we get involved in writing the guidelines for how to make best use of that. A lot of the work I've been involved in recently has been dealing with high flow measurement. It's very, very difficult to accurately measure flood flows, and that's what all flood risk analysis is based on ultimately. So yeah, quite a bit of work comes in trying to sort out how good or bad flood estimation of flood flows are. Oh, my background, yeah, I was a geography student, and I too went to Newcastle to do a engineering hydrology MSc, and went to Southampton, did a bit of work in hydrometry, and also did some work in water distribution, looking for leaks in water mains and things like that. Then to Reading and into water resources, hydrometry, and most of the past few years in flooding. That's me.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So hopefully you've seen that there's quite a wide variety of jobs that people are doing on our panel, from floods to droughts and kind of everything in between. We've got people from academia and industry, and the Environment Agency as well, and we've got people at lots of different kind of career stages too. So please put your questions in the chat, and I will ask them to the panel. Whilst you're doing that, I will ask some of the questions that I've got already. So basically, if anyone has an answer for this, then please do chip in. So my question for you is, what's the most important skill that you need in your job?
That's a good question. I guess you need a range of skills. I think being analytical is very important, doing a job in involving hydrology. So yeah, being analytical, but also being able to communicate and work in as a team, very important as well. So they're the top three for me.
Thanks, Emily.
I would say in the Environment Agency, a lot of the work we do is either public facing or working with lots of colleagues who are not hydrologists. So there's also a big communications element to be able to talk about hydrology and communicate why what we do is important is also a really important skill.
Thanks, Anita. Andrew?
Yeah, I think Anita hit the nail on the head. I'd probably say 90% of the meetings I attend, I'm the only hydrologist in the room, and they don't particularly have a hydrology background. So it's really important that you can communicate the message you've got, particularly when you're thinking about uncertainty in the data. That's a very hard thing for people to get their head around who aren't hydrologists. And at the end of the day, most people just want a number, but it's important that they do understand that although you may be able to give them a number, there's lots of uncertainty and lots of caveats around that number. Yeah, so communication is the one for me, as well as obviously be able to analyse the data and get the right answer to start off.
Great, thanks, Andrew. How about as an academic, Hayley? What do you think the most important skill is there?
So I think communication is really important in different ways. So either actually trying to teach, trying to supervise PhD students, or trying to communicate outside academia. I think one of the really important things for me is multitasking, actually. So there's so many different aspects and components to an academic job, whether it's administration, management, I mean, teaching, doing actual hands-on research, managing other people, outreach. There's just so many different things. You quite often have to switch very quickly between different topics and tasks, and that's quite difficult, but it's something that, I mean, obviously you tend to do that as you move on in academia. To start with, you probably just concentrate on research, doing a PhD and as a postdoc, so you kind of learn on the job. I don't know. So I think one of the main things in academia as well would be the ability to take on board criticism, and not get too upset about it, and kind of learn from that, because I think that it's quite a difficult place to work, or can be. And Liz has probably got some thoughts on this as well, but whatever you do, you will be criticised in some way. And it's kind of just taking that on the head and getting on with it, and just thinking, okay, and just doing it anyway, and just taking it as constructive, even when it isn't always.
Yeah, I agree. Criticism's hard to take, and kind of there's a lot of kind of failure in academia as well that doesn't really get shared. Everybody shares their achievements, and you look around and think, goodness, everyone's so much better than me, but you don't see the kind of 20 failed applications that went behind the one successful one. So yeah, that's hard as well. Okay, so we've got some good questions rolling in now from our audience. So Adam Hartley has asked, he's considering doing a PhD or a grad job, and he was wondering what the merits of doing a PhD are for employers, and do they find having a PhD attractive? So maybe we could start with Emily and Michael for this question.
So I'd say that most of the graduates we take on have have a master's, but not that many people have done a PhD specifically. So I'd say in terms of getting a graduate job, having a master's is definitely helps you stand out from the crowd, I suppose, but having the PhD, I guess we wouldn't be looking at you going in at the kind of lower graduate grade. So I wouldn't say it's a requirement at all, or I'd probably say, most people have a master's. We have got people with PhDs as well, but it doesn't really matter what you do on that front.
Thanks. So Michael did do a PhD and then went into industry. What's your perspective on this, Michael? Has it helped you?
Well, I suppose I'd start by saying, I suppose I did it a kind of a weird way, in that I did this thing I mentioned called the Knowledge Transfer Partnership, or the KTP, and that was kind of a hybrid, because I was sort of doing some of the experimental PhD work as part of the small company that I was working for. So that was my sort of slightly different take on it. So I don't really have experience of doing a straight PhD or a straight grad job. I suppose what I do, so when I then left the small company that I worked for, I then moved to a consultancy, and I think obviously what Emily had said is definitely true. You would not, you don't need a PhD to get a job in a consultancy. I wouldn't say that for a moment, but you might find it gives you a different take on things, or you might find that you approach things from a different angle. And certainly in my team at ARUP, there are three of us that have a PhD out of 5, and that's not, we don't that, you know, it's not why we're in the job, but I think you might find it useful, you know, but at the same time you don't need it, I think, is my my take on it.
Anita?
Yeah, just to say, we've just recently done some recruitment, and we did have some people with PhDs and others with not. And I would say probably what you know, I suppose from an environment agency point of view, and possibly also consultants, you're really looking for people who understand practically what you're doing, or what the practical reasons behind what you do. So I think that probably the type of PhD really matters. Like if it's something that's relevant and it's got full of relevant experience, then that's great. But I suppose if it's something that doesn't seem really operationally relevant, and compared to someone with a master's with 4 years experience, I think probably the 4 years experience would shine in the application and in the interview more than the PhD. But I would say then I think probably later on in your career, it's a good thing to have done. So I think then later on, when you know, if you are docs or whoever, I think it really helps to be in a room, and, you know, it's a good thing to have under your belt. But I don't think you probably end up starting at the same level as someone without a PhD, but then maybe later on in your career it kicks in, would be my instinct.
Yeah. As someone who has done a PhD and now supervises PhD students, I would say only do a PhD if you really want to do one. It's 3 to 4 years of intense work and isolation, and yeah, so it's tough, but if that's what you want to do, then great. But I don't think it necessarily gives you a kind of boost at the beginning of your career. Yeah, great, thanks. Question from Darryl Hughes: what are the pros and cons of doing hydrological research in university versus non-university organisations? So I guess maybe do any of you do research at the Environment Agency or within your companies? So does Mott, MacDonald or ARUP do any kind of research themselves?
I guess we sometimes have projects that are research projects, like led by DEFRA or EA or something. We have pots of money for kind of, if someone's got something they want to I guess if they want to develop some software or something in modelling, then, and they can justify there's a business case for it, then we have like funds for driving those sort of things. But yeah, we don't have the research here at universities at all, no.
Yeah, I'd say at the Environment Agency, we do sort of fund research projects, but often we might be funding academics or consultants to work on them, and some people might be working on a bit internally. But I guess maybe you're thinking CEH potentially as a sort of non-university research organisation, and I can't speak for them. I don't know, Andrew used to work for them, you might have some input there, but also they have changed recently, haven't they? They're now a sort of privately funded, so they used to be sort of awarded money from the government, but that's changed. They sort of work more like a consultancy now. I believe they do get some funds, so I'm not sure if they are still a research institute in the way that we might be thinking, the way that they're the funds that you can get, but I actually don't know about that. Is there anything you can add, Andrew?
Again, I've not been there for a few years, so they have changed. I don't want to say the wrong thing here. But CEH has got quite a lot of the projects we do is more towards consultancy, so we've got to have a real world answer at the end of it. I think that's the big difference between universities and other institutes. You can't keep going until you get a perfect answer. You've got a real world question, and usually a very small time deadline by the time you've actually got the funding all the way through and delivered. So it's, yeah, we would, rather than there's certainly something's going to be built at the end of it quite often, whether it's a flood defence or whether we're developing a drought model or a user interface of some description to help people. Or recently we contracted CEH to look at different distributions to fit extreme rainfall. And then at the end of that, they analysed a lot, and there's no clear winner necessarily, but we still had to make a decision, and this is what's gone in our guidance, and now it's for which water companies are using an exceptional shortage of rain assessment. So I think that's that's the difference. We've got to have an actual answer at the end of it and then take it forward.
Okay, great, thank you. A question from Emmanuel. What opportunities are there to get involved in the industry before a master's? So I'm assuming this means, are there any kind of placements available, work experience available at any of your organisations?
So we have internships for students. So I guess that's the main way of getting involved. Yeah.
Are they summer internships or?
Yeah, they tend to be summer internships. Yeah.
Yeah, we do the same, don't we, Dave? Dave, chip in? We have summer placements, I think, at the Environment Agency. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, if he doesn't, then I'm right.
Yeah, there are certainly interns. I think there were a couple around this summer, and there's also, you can do some training through the EA, but I don't know the details of that. But we do have people who are here doing an MSc and working in various departments, but I don't have the details.
Okay, thank you. This is quite a good question from Lynn. Are there startups in the kind of hydrology space, or is it more impactful to work with kind of an agency or company or consultancy or academic institution? How many of you work with kind of startups or very small companies?
We don't tend to work with, I think with smaller companies for doing the hydrology work. We have smaller companies that provide services like doing topographic surveying, things like that. But for the actual specific hydrology work, then that would be that we do it ourselves in-house. Yeah.
And I was just going to say, the Environment Agency, we have frameworks that certain consultants sort of are sitting on, so we can go directly to them quite easily, and they're generally quite large consultants. We rarely use sort of small startups, but we're a public body, operational work, so sort of not our area. Yeah.
I think to come in on the startup side, I don't have too much direct experience, but I know that there are people. I know a couple of people who have done sort of spin-off companies from maybe the research that they've been doing. And this can be around maybe some monitoring technologies and the analytics you might have associated with it. There's quite a lot of, I guess, emphasis at the moment on digital, like digital water, getting lots of data from your hydrological systems and being able to present and display that data in meaningful ways. And I think that there's a space there there's a place for small companies like that to fill. I don't know if that's my input anyway.
Great, thank you. A question from Alana. What makes an individual stand out when applying for a grad job in hydrology?
It's a good question. I think for me, it's about having the kind of overarching understanding of hydrology and how to apply it. So it's not, and how to apply it in different scenarios and for different projects. So it's not specifically like knowing the nitty-gritty about one specific area. It's about being able to apply it over, apply it in the real world, I suppose, and apply it to a range of different things, and to be able to talk about the pros and the cons and understand the assumptions and the limitations of the data and that kind of aspect and element of it all.
Yeah, I would second that. I'd say also sort of looking for people who can sort of show initiative, I suppose, and a sort of questioning mind, I guess. It's aptitude generally, and sort of, I think part of being a hydrologist is sort of being investigator in some ways. It's like detective work a lot of the time. So someone who can sort of show that questioning, ability to question, and communicate and understand why, for me, understand the bigger picture of why we do hydrology, really, I think would be really stand out.
Yes, just to add to that, the Environment Agency does publish a lot of what we do on the internet. So if you're applying for a water resources hydrology job, for example, in Devon and Cornwall, just have a quick Google of Devon and Cornwall hydrology. You'll find information on the Water Framework Directive. You'll see which catchments are over abstracted, where there's water available. And you don't need to study them in detail. We're just having a good sort of bit of an overview of the challenges we're facing in Devon and Cornwall goes an awful long way. When you sit and you can use sort of local examples.
Great, thanks everyone. A question from Lauren. Is work experience vital when applying for grad jobs? So presumably this means, can you go straight from doing a master's, or should you have tried to do summer internships and things like that during your undergraduate degree?
I'd say that I mean, obviously work experience is useful because it'll help in your interview to have those conversations and stuff, but I wouldn't say it's vital at all. I've just done a load of interviewing the last couple of weeks, and some had work experience and some didn't. And I think it's much more about your understanding of the whole subject and how to apply it, rather than whether you've had that that experience. But obviously getting that experience might help you build up your picture. So I wouldn't say it's vital, but obviously if you can have it, then it's going to be a good thing.
Just to add to that a little bit, I think it's, if you can get a few months work experience, it does help. For the Environment Agency, we usually ask questions. How would you interpret this? What would, for competency-based questions, you've got to be able to give examples of how you do this in the real world, and just a few months saying, I've got all my knowledge, I've got a good degree, got an MSc, I've got all the knowledge, and I've got a few months where I've shown I've been able to apply it. It can give you an extra couple of marks in an interview.
Great, thanks. A question from Freya about really about how specialised your master's course should be. So if you can't do a very specialised master's like catchment management, would a more general master's like water security still be useful across all of these jobs? Seeing some nods. Yeah.
Sorry, yes, I think it definitely would be. I think everyone in both teams that I work in, so it's 9 in total, have got MSCs. I'm just trying to think. I think everyone's got a different MSc. Some are in geography, some are in environmental science, someone's got an engineering MSc. They're quite varied. So I wouldn't worry too much about. Obviously, you want to be in the right area, but about whether it's specifically the exact one, like for the job you're applying for or not.
Yeah, it probably depends. I don't know if water security, how much is, if it is an MSc or an MA, I think that might make the difference. But I think probably any MSc that was water related would, as Andrew said, be okay.
Yeah, and I'd agree that it it's just picking up those skills of analysing, understanding the bigger picture, etc. Is useful. Obviously, I guess it depends what the masters is, and obviously if you're coming in for a flood modelling job, if you've done a masters that involves modelling and understanding modelling and hydrology and all that, then that will help. But yes, I think it's applying that, having that initiative, the logic, the analysis and everything, understanding the bigger picture, that's important too.
I would say as well that you can use your kind of master's dissertation as kind of a pivot to the direction of the career that you want to work in. So if your MSc is quite a broad topic, then if you can find a master's project that's more in line with the direction that your career want to go, then that could be really useful, because I guess like Andrew was saying, that kind of adds to those competency-based questions where you have to kind of provide evidence and examples of when you've done something in particular. So say choosing a modelling dissertation will definitely help you give you experience and evidence for you know, those kinds of questions in industry.
But then what I'd add as well is like my team at work we're the water resources and flooding team. So we've got a whole range of different people doing lots of different things. And some people come in having done a master's in flooding, and then they actually get some experience working on other more water resources or drought projects, and that takes their interest. And so having someone who's open-minded as well and wants to apply and look at a range of stuff can be a benefit too.
It's probably important that you understand hydrological processes, isn't it? I think fundamentally that whatever masters it is, and then you can apply it, but that it covers that at least.
Great. Sally wants to know, did anyone go through a grad scheme, and what are the differences between doing a grad scheme and a normal kind of graduate job, and which would you recommend? So did anyone go through a grad scheme? No, lots of head shakes. Emily, no?
I'm not really sure what you mean by grad scheme.
So I think some companies, maybe it's not so you kind of common in hydrology maybe, but you kind of get a cohort of people being employed all at the same time, and they go through training together, and so there's kind of a more...
So I guess we do a grad intake, so we have the graduates all start at a similar time and then have like a 2-year kind of few training bits and bobs and a graduate. But it's, I think that is the grad job, though. That is a graduate job.
Okay, I think, well, okay, then maybe the graduate job means just kind of an individual post that is lower.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Like so you did go through a kind of, were you in a grad intake?
Well, when I started, they didn't have the same thing, but now they have this kind of grad intake. And then, you have like this MacDonald Academy, and you have all these different courses on doing presentations and all this client relationship building and all the different kind of different skill sets to develop.
Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about the kind of career trajectories of people who do that? Is it kind of a faster track to work your way up, or is it pretty much the same?
No, it's pretty much the same, really. So I guess everyone who's a graduate will come in and do those first 2 years with that extra, with those training. And I mean, I guess in Mott, it's about getting people up to being chartership level. So if someone comes in who's got 3 years experience, it will still be working to develop them up to that level. So if they're like, if there's an area they need to focus on, then we'll give them that kind of support. So I guess everyone kind of progresses up the same, really.
Great, thanks. I've got a question from Salah about PhD funding. So maybe this is one for Hayley. Have you got any comments on kind of the state of PhD funding currently, especially for, well, I guess, and the differences for kind of UK students and international students?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of funding available at the moment through doctoral training partnerships and programs and CDTs as well. I'm trying to think what they're called, Centres for Doctoral Training. There are always individual schemes available through universities as well. So at the moment, the UKRI says that we can recruit 30% international students, so that's both EU from next year and obviously further afield. So that's the rules at the moment, but the universities have to make up the fees. So it's not clear how this is going to actually happen across the university sector. Some universities are happy to take that 30% international and others aren't. So it's kind of an individual thing, and I think it's quite difficult for international students to find funding to do PhDs in the UK. It seems to be much harder than in many other European countries. I mean, the other thing is to look at schemes like Commonwealth scholarships. There's other sort of country-specific schemes that exist as well for international students.
Great, thanks, Hayley. Question from Sally, who's one of my master's students, who I've just we've just been learning how to code in Python. So her question is, has anyone coded as part of their job? Which languages did you use? And is it a sought after skill? Which language is the most common in hydrology?
We use Python a lot and it's sought after. So
Vindicated.
Likewise, and it's something I think that there's a lot of emphasis and focus on. Yeah.
Same in consultancy and in DHI, it's really important. Everything you do is coding, and Python was sort of coming in, but then some stuff might be in VBA or the older systems in other languages. So I think it's good to have, if there's one, probably Python's a good one, but it's also really good to be able to understand the difference, you know, how to learn a different one as well. R a lot as well. R.
Excellent, thank you very much. That's made me very happy. Topical question. Does the panel have any idea if Brexit is going to be affecting EU hydrologists who would like to start their career in the UK?
From my understanding, it's going to make it, I think the paperwork for trying to get a job is going to be a bit harder, but there's still lots of jobs. Well, and for us, there's lots of jobs at the minute. So I think what we found is that we've had less people applying from the EU for jobs at the minute, especially with COVID. So, but yeah, I think it's just the paperwork. If the paperwork gets sorted out, there shouldn't be an issue. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds promising then.
I think it's probably the same in academia as well. We're allowed a certain allocation of visas. So it's simply the fact that we have to apply for visas, presumably anyway, for EU hydrologists. I don't think anything's clear about Brexit yet in terms of what's needed and what isn't needed, really. But yeah, it should be possible. Yeah, and I suppose it will become clearer in January, hopefully.
Yeah, so then we've got a couple of questions that kind of follow on from that about COVID-19. So how are jobs being affected and how are internship opportunities being affected by COVID-19?
So we had to cancel our intern this year, who was meant to come for June, July and August, I think. But then we've just offered her a job instead. So that's been okay for her, I suppose. But we've just done our graduate recruitment round. It's not being impacted, and we've got interns lined up for next summer as well. So we've got lots of work on and need people. So COVID doesn't seem to have affected us really.
I say the Environment Agency is probably, maybe it's not just COVID, it's probably lots of things that is a bit twofold. Like on the flood side, things are still looking okay. We haven't been granted all the funds we thought, but people expect it to come still. So, you know, that sort of has a knock-on effect to all the consultants, that most of the work that consultants do, a lot of the work that consultants do is for the Environment Agency. So that looks fine on the flood side, but I think on the other side, on the water resources side, the funding, the situation isn't as good at the moment, but yeah, there'll still be work around.
Great, thanks. Question from Rachel. If you don't have a master's or hydrology degree, can you apply for lower level jobs and move up inside the companies and learn on the job instead? How essential is a master's in hydrology?
I'd say if you haven't got a master's or a degree in specifically hydrology.
I think specifically hydrology.
Yeah, because I did geography, so that was, you know, hydrology was part of it, wasn't specifically hydrology. So I think if a lot of the graduates we've had have done, yeah, maybe geography and then a master's in environmental science or something. So I don't think it specifically needs to be hydrology. Usually hydrology and modelling is part of it. There's an element to it and understanding the concepts and things.
Yeah, I think in the Environment Agency we're probably a bit different there. I think we do have sort of entry-level jobs where you're not required to be a graduate, but you can get experience maybe in hydrometry and other areas, and you can learn and sort of work your way up internally, where I think, yeah, probably at consultants, there's a sort of requirement to go in more expert level. Yeah, I think there are fewer of them than there used to be, but we do have sort of, we're talking also about trying to bring apprenticeships back as well, actually. That's a big push. So I think we will have some of those lower level entry jobs.
Great. Ooh, interesting question. Are there any online resources from BHS or other organisations available for early career hydrologists to learn hydrological modelling? I suppose you would typically learn about modelling during an MSc. My advice for this would be to basically lots of models will have their own websites with their own kind of training guidance. So the models that we use at Newcastle, all the information of how to get started with the models is available online. So I'd probably go and have a look at some job adverts and see which models are being used for the jobs that you're interested in, if you wanted to have a go beforehand, and then go and have a look and play with some of the example data that they give you. But I suppose a lot of the models that are used in industry are actually kind of paid for, and so you might not be able to do that. So anyone else got any views on resources for learning modelling? No? Okay.
One thing I would say there is, I mean, it's quite common for people, especially with, like, I suppose, flood modelling, to not as specifically have used that software, the software that we use in consultancy. Whilst they're doing a master's or a PhD, they might have developed their own model, like using Excel or something, or using different software. So that just because they haven't actually used the software that we use, like, that's not kind of, we wouldn't expect people to have used it specifically, and they quickly pick it up on the job, sort of thing.
Yeah, I said that you sort of, we'd be looking for understanding of extreme value analysis, you know, things like that, the sort of fundamentals, understanding how, what we're modelling and how, so the statistical side or the hydrological processes. But yeah, the actual models, you can learn which buttons to press as long as you understand what those models are doing, like why you're doing it. That's what matters more. You can teach the rest of it.
Great, thanks. A question from Elle. Before COVID, how much of your career was spent outdoors in the field? I know Michael's spent a lot of time outside. Maybe you want to take this on.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, that all changed in my, like Liz mentioned earlier, when I started to do my dissertation. So I picked a dissertation that I knew would get me out in the field, and have really enjoyed that element of it. So my research was, I set up 4 sites around South Scotland and the north of England to measure rainfall and other meteorological parameters, and then I was responsible for managing and monitoring those sites. So I was out probably you know, for, let's say, a day every couple of weeks, I think, for 3 or 4 years. And it was, you know, a long day. It might be an overnight stay as well. So I think if you're interested in that kind of thing, there are opportunities. But I think it's having that and doing that at the same time as the modeling stuff. I think it's important to have a nice balance between the two. But you know, if you want to do that, there's opportunity to do that. Whereas, you know, if you don't want to do that, I think, you know, you can also, if you really want to, sit behind a computer for 4 years if you're doing a PhD.
That's what I did. Great, thanks.
I'd say it's Google Maps that has made the site visits go down in number rather than COVID. Once there's Google Earth and you could look stuff up on the computer, then you didn't have to go out on site so much. And also the kind of the recession and cutting back on travel costs and stuff. But we still go out every project. You kind of need to go out on site and have a look at what you're modelling. So it's still an element of outdoors a bit.
Yeah, I would say that again, it's not COVID related. I've never spent much time in the field my whole career, and I went into hydrology because I wanted to be outside. And then basically, what I found is there's often a division of labour, and the sort of the analysing the data and coming up with the solutions is the sort of behind the computer job. And then in the environment agency, and I think lots of places, and the collection of the data. I don't know if you can hear my baby screaming about it, but then that's a totally different job, the hydrometry job. So you have the people that collect the data and then the people that work on the data, which is a real shame because it would be nice to do both. But I've found that often it's one or the other, sadly.
I think you're spot on there. Yeah, our hydrometry teams will go out 4 days a week most weeks, whereas for hydrology area teams, I used to go out probably 1 day a month. And usually that was to go to a contentious site and meet a water company or landowners and just debate things on site. Rather, yeah. If you want to be outside a lot, I think hydrometry is probably the one to go for. You go out most days and stand in rivers. It's rain and shine though. It's got pros and cons. Sometimes when the weather's nasty, I don't envy them at all.
Brilliant. Well, we've only got 3 minutes left. So one last question, the only one that we haven't got to is how many of you work with kind of chartered professionals? How many of you are chartered and how many of you aren't?
So I'm chartered, and in Mott it's quite a thing that I guess that's the career progression, is that it's you get on, you graduate, and then the idea is you're working towards chartership. It's quite important. Yeah.
Thanks. But presumably not so much in the environment agency.
There is a. No, go on, sorry, Andrew.
Sorry, I was going to say, yeah, not as much. It's not as pushed. It's encouraged, but there's no financial incentive for becoming chartered, unlike most consultants. So it's I think people eventually get there. You do it sort of the EA is very good at giving you plenty of time for training and developing yourself. So you do it in work time, but you've got to juggle it around meetings and other deadlines. So I think I'm probably about halfway through filling in my chartership application. It's been on the go for about 2.5 years now. So it's I think that's quite common across hydrologists.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a big push for it, but I think I've always just avoided it, but and I've sort of been okay avoiding it. But I think because I've worked abroad a lot, and it doesn't really exist in other countries, and so it sort of hasn't been high up on my list because it doesn't seem so valuable. But I think UK consultancies really go for it, because then their CV they're kind of selling their CVs, which makes
and I guess in terms of career progression within the company, it's like it's showing you've reached a certain competency, so you can't progress beyond a certain grade if you're not chartered. So it's kind of I guess it's showing you've achieved a certain level. Yeah,
I guess that's the same as kind of having a PhD.
Yeah. It's the engineer's equivalent, is it, of a PhD or something? It's because we're engineer, and it's an engineering consultancy, I suppose. So it's that's how it all started. So yeah, it's kind of the next step. Yeah.
Is it worth mentioning, Liz? Maybe people are already aware of it, but like the different relevant sort of charterships to hydrology. Like, well, I mean, I can think of 2, but I don't want to. I'm sure there are others.
What are they?
So as Emily just mentioned, the ICE, Institute of Civil Engineering, and that's obviously affiliated with BHS, but also the CIWEM, Chartered Institute of Water Environmental Management.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, so CIWEM's the main one, I think, in our team, and then we have people chartered in maths and Geology Society and lots of different things. Yeah.
Awesome. Right. It's 2:00 now, so we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you all so much for all your questions. I've really enjoyed asking them and hearing the answers. And thank you very much to everyone on our panel as well. Please let me know if this has been a useful session for you and you'd like more of these kinds of events through BHS. And we're very happy to organise things that are useful. Thanks everyone again.
Cheers all, thanks.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.